Is the old colonial world order starting to crack? And what does that mean for Africa? I didn't come to this question through theory. I came to it by noticing patterns. The same tension showing up in different countries, different headlines, but the same undertone. It made me stop and ask, are we watching the old colonial world order starting to crack? And if we are, what does that mean for Africa? My name is Noreen, and this is Real Africa Stories. Before I go any further, let me be clear about what I mean when I say colonialism today. I'm not talking about flags, governors, or formal empire. That version mostly ended decades ago. Modern colonialism is quieter. It shows up in who sets the rules, who controls access to money, who defines what stability looks like, and who gets labelled a problem when they don't comply. It's power without occupation, influence without accountability, systems that were built during colonialism but never fully dismantled after independence. So when I talk about colonial structures cracking, I'm talking about those systems, the ones that decide whose government is considered legitimate, whose economy is trusted, and whose voice is treated as credible. That's the lens I'm using. For a long time, the world ran on a few unspoken rules. That power flowed outward from the West, that legitimacy was something you were granted, that African countries were expected to follow, adjust, and comply. Even after independence, those rules didn't disappear. They just changed language. Security partnerships, development frameworks, governance standards. And for a while, that system held. But lately, something feels different. Not hopeful exactly, not chaotic either, just unsettled. Here's the first shift I started to notice. Let's start in Mali. For years, security in this region was framed as something managed externally, largely by France, with wider Western backing, necessary, non-negotiable. Then Mali said no. And what struck me wasn't just the decision, it was the tone. There was no apologizing, no waiting for approval, no attempt to soften the message. Just, this arrangement no longer serves us. That moment mattered, not because Mali suddenly had all the answers, but because it showed that inherited authority no longer automatically commands respect. You see similar energy in Burkina Faso and Niger. Different politics, different leadership, same refusal to keep playing a role that was written decades ago. This isn't chaos. It's renegotiation. Then I started seeing a similar tension further east. Let's move to Ethiopia. Ethiopia has always carried itself differently. A long civilizational memory, a strong sense of sovereignty. In East Africa, Western influence hasn't always arrived through soldiers. It's often come through diplomacy, aid conditions, and expectations about governance shaped by international institutions and donors. So, when pressure mounted during the internal conflict, the response wasn't submission, it was resistance. And what that exposed wasn't stubbornness. It exposed the limits of Western moral authority. For decades, legitimacy meant approval from the outside. Today, some African states are choosing internal control over external validation. You see quieter versions of this in Kenya, where alliances feel increasingly transactional, and in Somalia, where sovereignty is being reclaimed after years of international management. This isn't anti-West, it's post-supervision. Another place this becomes impossible to ignore. Now, let's go to the center of the continent, the Democratic Republic of the Congo. If there's one place where colonialism never truly left, it's here. Central Africa has long been shaped by global demand, largely from Western markets for minerals that power modern life. The cobalt in your phone, the coltan in your laptop. The materials driving the green transition. They've been leaving the ground for decades. What hasn't followed is development at the same pace. And what's changing now isn't the mining itself, it's the conversation around it. Who benefits? Who decides? Who carries the cost? Africa's leverage today isn't symbolic, it's structural. You see similar unease in Chad and new partnerships forming in Central African Republic. Colonial power relied on controlling resources and the story around them. The resources remain, but the story is being challenged. And then there's Southern Africa. Let's talk about South Africa. Often described as the place where colonialism and apartheid were meant to have ended cleanly, the success story. But unresolved history doesn't disappear, it waits. In Southern Africa, Western influence shows up less through direct control and more through narrative, whose fear is amplified and whose history is treated as settled. Debates around land, belonging, safety, and identity are becoming louder again. And recently, when the United States granted asylum to a small group of Afrikaners, something familiar resurfaced. Old fears, old narratives, old hierarchies of sympathy. What matters here isn't the individuals involved. It's how quickly the story travelled and how easily certain fears were understood. You see similar unresolved tensions in Namibia, where colonial accountability remains unfinished, and Zimbabwe, where defiance has long been punished rather than engaged with. Southern Africa reminds us of something important. Colonialism shaped more than systems. It shaped perception, and perception is often the last structure to fall. So what connects all of this? This isn't collapse, it's pressure. An old order depended on three things: moral authority, economic dependence, narrative control. All three are wobbling. Africa isn't unified in response, but it's unified in questioning. And that matters more than agreement, because power only lasts as long as people believe in it. So what does this mean for Africa? This moment is uncomfortable and uncertain. There will be missteps, there already are. But something fundamental has shifted. Africa is no longer asking how to fit into the world as it is. It's asking what kind of world it wants to help shape. And that question changes everything. So maybe the real issue isn't whether colonial structures are collapsing. Maybe it's this: what replaces them? And who gets to decide the terms? This is the Africa you're not shown, but I'm here to show you.